Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So this one is against 23 Dragons. Let's get to it. E4, E5, F4, D5. So now this presents the question, what is this? And it is the King's Gambit. Decline. So E takes D5, E takes F4, D4, Knight F6. So this is a standard line where White is going to develop with Knight F3, play C4, eventually get this pawn on F4 and just roll with it. So C4, C6, but now this is the only mistake. Getting a little bit greedy with D takes C6. Now usually in the line people play Knight C3 or Knight F3 and they just continue with their development. Bishop takes F4 should also work. But after D takes C6, Knight takes C6, and now, well, development helps. Knight F3, Bishop B4 check. Knight C3 castles, Bishop E2, Knight to E4. So immediately I'm pressuring this pinned knight. Queen C2 now leads to Bishop to F5, and all of a sudden, all Hail Mary breaks loose because Knight takes D4 is on the horizon. Knight takes C3 is on the horizon. A3 now. Well, what can I do? I play Knight takes C3. Now another thing to do was Knight takes D4, because after Knight takes D4, Queen takes D4, A takes Bishop, Queen F2, King D1, Rook F to D8. And after Knight to D5, well, Queen takes G2 with the threat of Knight to F2 also wins. Right? So even after that complex variation, I have more. But instead I play Knight takes C3. I don't complicate it. I say if you take my bishop on F5, I'm going to take on E2. But here's the thing. I didn't have to take on E2. I could have also played the move Queen to E7. I threatened the bishop on E2, put more pressure, but I failed to spot it because, you know what? I was in a simul, and in a simul, you don't play your best moves. You don't play your best chess, but you do have a lot of logic and thought put into it. Knight takes e2, pawn takes b4, but now knight takes d4, and after queen to d3, well, a little Forktown coming right up. Forktown, Yorktown, heading my way. So, what really happened here? Well, c6, d takes c6 had to be the one and only. It gave black the developmental advantage that black needed to put this pressure on, right? So if white was faster with development, so if 23 Dragons had just castled one move earlier, this could have been avoided. But it was all because of this c6, d takes c6, knight takes c6. It gave black more time to build up incentive, and now this just gave more incentive with this bishop f5 with the knight g3 discovery. So there are a lot of things. And after a3, I could have done so many things. I mean, knight takes c3 could have been one, knight takes d4 could have been one, rook to e8 could have also been one. It was all over the place. So here I could have played queen to e7 or rook to e8, but essentially this game really fell because I got ahead on development. That's all I'll say. So in the next game, I was against 23 Dragons again, and I played the white side. So here, this was just a very interesting opening. G6, and I said, bishop takes f6. I doubled 23 Dragons as pawns, and I said, let me bring my knight out, rook out, pawn out. And this is actually very common. Bishop to e2, not very common. But after f5, knight to f3, knight to e5 is a good try. I play d4, and here it got really complicated. Bishop to h6, wonderful move. I play g3. I say, if you want to take, you can take. Here I played g takes f4, now b6. And I kind of thought like, yeah, I can see why. Because first of all, the bishop has no future on this diagonal. So the bishop wants to come here, right? So I play knight d2. After c5, I play d5. I shut down the diagonal. Now, I kind of felt like maybe here, what if I played c5, right? That is also a thought I could have went through, but that weakens the d5 square as well. So that's something to think about. So in the game, knight d2 happened, c5, d5. I shut down the diagonal. I said, no, 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 you can't go anywhere. But I gave my opponent the chance to play a6 and b5. And after queen c2, our friend 23Dragons plays b5 immediately. And I'm like, wow, I'm shocked. Right? And I'm like, what if I just take? And all of a sudden, after bishop b7, queen c4, knight takes e3, well, I was expecting knight f6 and a6. Just simply saying, I'm going to open this, and I'm going to pressure on this pawn, just do everything I can. But after knight takes e3, well, that got interesting. Pawn takes, knight f1, queen e7, rook to c3. Now, I could have also played king to f2 and brought my bishop to f3. That was probably the much better strategy, but I didn't employ it. Rook to c3. Why? Because to rook lift my rook to e3. Rook to e8, rook to e3. Queen to f6, king to f2. Rook to e7, and now what I should have done is I should have played bishop to f3. So if you ever play queen to b2, well, I just play king to g3. Rook takes, knight takes, and if you take on a2, well, I have plenty. I have queen to c3 for starters, saying, may I trap your queen, sir? That's one. So, queen to b2 is not a good move here. But instead, I didn't play bishop f3 because I was scared of queen to b2, when in reality I shouldn't. Rook to h3, I said I'm going to support my rook, so if it happens, I'm going to take with my knight. Rook out, I play queen to d3. So what is my purpose of queen to d3? Well, I said, I want to give more support to my friend the rook here. And I want to try to change it up. I want to get the bishop out here, try to establish some stronghold. Rook to e4. Now this is an interesting move. I would say that rook to e4 would be good in this position, because now there's no e8 rook to worry about. Whereas, if this rook comes to e4 right now, if I just sidestep it, the rook cannot take on e4 because, well, the rook's behind it is hanging. So, rook to e4 is a really good move. However, do it in this order, and you would have gotten slightly better results. But in the game, our friend 23Dragons also played extremely well. So in the game, rook to e4 happened, and I missed the move bishop to f3. I don't know how. Rook takes e3, knight takes e3, and I would be completely fine there. I don't know how I missed the move, but I missed it, and I admit to it. I always have room for improvement. So instead, I played king to g1, and I said, you take, I will take your rook. King to g7, and now a4. I said, you know what? I'm tired of thinking about queen to b2. I just want to play a4. I want to secure my pawn structure. And now queen to d4. And I said, let's trade, and bishop to c4. I assumed that this endgame would be okay for me. It was okay, but it was hard. So I brought my knight out, and here, after I got this d4 pawn, I said I'm completely winning. Thank goodness. Right, so I brought my rook this way. I wasn't exactly scared by the threats that 23 Dragons made, because look at this, king to g3, what do I do here? Rook to g1 saves the day. King to f2, then what? Well, let me just bring my rook over to c1, right? You want to play king here? Well, I mean, all I have to do is I might play rook c3, right? That's another way to do it, but I mean, 23 Dragons was really close in this game. But in the end, the white pieces prevailed, and, well, it was a very hard-fought game. So, in the opening, it was all good, right? Both sides played fine. It was a battle of space. It was a battle of pawn structure. But I would have to say c takes b5 for me was a little bit dangerous due to the fact that after seeing the aftermath of what happened on the board, this pawn on d5 was just a little bit too weak, you know? So think about it that way. C takes b5, bishop to b7, and I was doing good. Rook to c3, rook to e3, right? Another solution could have been king f2, bishop to f3. Probably would have been the better solution. But here I went, and here, instead of going rook to e4, take first, and then go to e4. So, after queen to d3, it just, at this point, it was feeling very complicated. You know, at this point, I said, I might lose some of my pawns. However, I need to maintain my piece advantage. I need to keep that bishop out of the game. Those are my main goals. And I sort of did that, but here, queen to d4 was maybe a little bit soon. I mean, maybe there was rook to d4. Right after rook takes e8, rook takes d3, rook takes d3, queen takes h4. I don't know. I mean, after a4, rook to e7, preparing rook d4 would have been very smooth as well. So there are many options. As you can tell, this was not a one-sided game, right? We saw that sacrifice on e3, and I said, oh, very bold. But what I underestimated was this ability to crack through and this ability for the bishop to put so overwhelming pressure to make these two look really clumsy. So it was a struggle. I prevailed, but with luck again. So hope you enjoyed, and please enjoy your own games. Find your curiosity, and I will see you next time.